This is the final word, T20 World Cup Daily, Day 21. Geoff Lemon and Matt Roller in St Lucia. Show's brought to you by Westfield London, Westfield Stratford City. It's also brought to you today by Darren Sammy's car parking space, which we can park in because he's not here. He's gone somewhere else. Antigua? I can't remember.
Barbados. They play the USA tonight or tomorrow, depending on where you are.
Tonight or tomorrow. Anyway, Geoff Lemon, Matt Roller with you of ESPN Crick Info. He is me. I kind of was. I've written some stuff for them over the years. Anyway, that's not the point. This is the final word. And you have to tell me about England playing South Africa, Matt, in the space of 30 seconds.
South Africa get about 160. We think it's unders, but it's a weird first innings because both teams are happy, which doesn't normally happen in T20. But basically, they work out pretty early. Quinton de Kock works out pretty early that it's not going to be quite the same belter that it has been in the night games. In a day game, he whacks it in the power play, gets 60-odd. South Africa are off to a massive start. Then they get dragged back pretty well. England think that they've done all right. Then they're really slow at the start of their chase. Then Livingstone and Brook go big, and with 20-odd to win off 3 overs, they think this is going to be a pizza piss. Then they somehow lose by 7 runs. Good death bowling from South Africa. And actually, this result at the time we are right now isn't that bad for either team because South Africa are pretty much through and England should be pretty much through as long as West Indies don't have 2 big wins, and even then that might be enough.
Well, West Indies could knock off South Africa if they could do that heavily.
But then that could dent South Africa's run rate, which then means that unless England are washed out against USA, which they might be,
I think England will be okay, but South Africa will be in trouble.
Yeah, correct. Which is weird, given that South Africa have played 2-1-2. But then I suppose one of the wins was against the weaker opponent, so it's tricky. But
they've won 2 by not much each.
Yeah, correct.
That's kind of where we're getting, where you could have 2 teams ending up on 4 points. But let's look at this game. It's an odd kind of game because Quinton de Kock comes out in the power play like a steam train. He whacks Moeen down the ground for 6. They're like, oh, we'll bring on an off spinner to the left-hander. He doesn't like facing spin. And he's like, I do like facing spin. 6 and 4 down the ground. Archer bowls pace on. Quinton de Kock takes him sort of from outside leg stump, over fine leg twice, hits 2 sixes in the over. The over costs 21 in the end. Even Hendricks plays a pull shot for 4, which is the only good shot he plays in his entire innings because he's otherwise batting.
World Cup so far, really.
Well, yeah. He's having the classic busted ass World Cup at the moment, and it may click for him, but it didn't today. What was he? 16 off 20. One in the end.
Generous, yeah.
8 dot balls in there, couldn't get off strike. Reece Topley was bowling to him, couldn't score off him. But de Kock's scoring so quickly it doesn't matter. And so they push through the power play at 63 was it at the end of the power play, and they're going at 10 and over, and you're thinking this is normal. And then there's a screeching of the brakes. Adil Rashid comes on, Moeen bowls tidily, Archer comes back in the 12th and bowls a really quiet over. There's nothing much happening, and you think that's the anomaly because you've seen that power play, but then you realise exactly the same thing happens in England's innings, except they don't get as fast a start. They're 1 for 41 in the power play, and those overs from like 6, after the 6, from 7 through to about 11 or 12, slow. Markram gets away with an over for 4 runs. Maharaj is bowling, conceding bugger all, and those overs were the truer reflection of what was happening on that surface out there than the quick power plays.
Yeah, absolutely. And on the TV broadcast a couple of times they had some stats as to I think balls over 140 k's an hour, so 87 miles an hour if you're from where I am. That's going to be, I think they went at about a strike rate of 180, 190, and everything under 140 went at a strike rate of about 100, 110. So basically, if you took the pace off, you're going to be pretty successful. And also, what we saw both teams do pretty well was use the facilities, use the pitch, bang it in short, make batters put pace on the ball, which when you're hitting into the breeze, which obviously you were half of the time, that's going to be pretty tricky stuff. So it ended up being, it was a really interesting game tactically, I thought, because of all those little intricacies with the wind and the slightly shorter side, and then the downwind and the upwind, and then the cross breeze coming this way, and then the shorter boundary being in play, but then not being in play because it was in the wind and all this stuff. And you had so many times where balls would go up in the air and you think that's 4 or you think that's out, and then the complete opposite thing would happen because your brain isn't quite attuned to the fact there's a 15-mile-an-hour wind going that way, which is kind of from the northeast, I think.
I guess,
but, it's pretty confusing until you finally get used to it by the end and you think, that's out. When Livingstone sticks one up in the air that looks off the bat like it's going to be 6 and actually is caught comfortably deep square leg.
Two in the wind tunnel, 2 wickets in the wind tunnel for England because Moeen hits one out that way as well. But we'll start with the first innings first. So there's 5 overs of spin after the power play. There's 1 boundary in that entire period. Quinton de Kock gets caught but not quite caught, overruled. Mark Wood out at deep back with square leg. Best got dropped in the second innings, didn't he? Anyway, but then Reza Hendricks gets so frustrated he hits one down the ground and gets caught. And then eventually, so the 12th over. It's 89 for 1 at this point. They've still had this fast start, and then Archer comes back on, having gone for 21, bowls a beauty of an over, goes for 2 or 3, bowls a slower ball bouncer. De Kock tries to uppercut it, ends up gloving it, sort of edging it behind where Buttler gloves a really good catch. And, at that point, England do really well to pull them back at that stage, I thought, and keep things slow through the middle. And it takes David Miller coming in towards the end. But this weird thing where, so Klaasen gets promoted to 3, and I'm like, I love that. Great move. Love Klaasen. I think he's maybe the best hitter in the world right at the moment, and he comes out and absolutely struggles. He can't get anything going anywhere. He hits one sort of cross-batted shot down the ground, and he's out there for several overs, and he's unhappy, and he doesn't want to be there, and it's not the right kind of pitch, and he can't hit anything, and then eventually he manages to get run out by Miller calling him through for an extra run on a wide, wasn't it, where Klaasen didn't respond and then ran looking backwards over his shoulder the whole way. Yeah. Weird innings. When has Klaasen ever sucked the air out of an innings? And it really set them behind the rate for a time, and then it takes Miller to come back in at the end and find a way just to muscle some boundaries on a pitch where the ball's not coming on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think Miller, this will sound like damning him with faint praise, but I think he's one of the best sort of middle order players in the world at those sort of ugly, grunty innings. Mm-hmm. If you're listing the best finishers in the world to score at 200 strike rate, he might not be in there. You'd have like a Tim David, you'd have an Andre Russell. But if you want someone to play an innings like that in a 160 odd par game, striking at 150 odd, that's not necessarily going to be the most destructive, most eye-catching innings of the day, but is going to be absolutely invaluable to his team. I think Miller's right up there. I think he's played on some pretty ropey pitches back home at times, like in the SA20, his home ground is Pole, which is a notoriously dicey pitch. He played really, really well. I think one thing England possibly, I wonder, and I'd be interested to hear what you think on this, but could they have been a tiny bit more ruthless with how they used Mark Wood? Because Wood didn't bowl until the 14th over, and by that point, I think it was starting to become apparent that it probably wasn't going to be a Mark Wood pitch. And the second
it was already apparent given they hadn't bowled him until the 14th over.
But I think having got to that point, given that they could have made the sums right, I think Curran only bowled 3 in the first innings.
And Moen only bowled 3.
So they had the options there from the pace-off bowlers. Could they have been even more ruthless and said, look, while we've picked you, this isn't your pitch, and this is no reflection on your ability. This is just a reflection on what you are and what we need. Could England have not bowled Wood for about a second over, which I think cost 12 or 13. I think there were 3 boundaries in it.
Yeah, he went for about 20 off his 2.
And then could they have got one extra cheap over out the way? But then I suppose this is the classic fine margins T20 game, where if you isolate any one over or any one thing, that can be seen as the thing that made the difference. But I wonder if Buttler could have been just that 5%, 10% more ruthless and said, Curran.
I like the idea. It's like retiring a batter out. If you go, look, sorry, mate, you're not bowling today. And it would be a bit of an ego blow, but if anyone's going to wear it, it's probably Mark Wood, who's got the personality to accept that if it's in the team's best interest. I'll tell you what, drop Chris Jordan into that team instead of Mark Wood, and he'd be pretty handy coming in at number 8, wouldn't he, when they needed 14 off the last over as well. So that's the kind of, I don't know, the situation they found themselves in. It was like, well, we have to bowl him because we've picked him in the 11. It felt more like that rather than he's the right option to come on at this period of time. And he goes for, there's 3 boundaries off that over, and somehow Miller manages to squeeze a 6 here and there. He sort of hits a 6 off Archer, he gets 1 off Curran, he sort of belts that pull shot. Archer picks up 2 wickets in his last over, which helps sort of suppress that scoring. And at 8 and over, you think, well, England should stroll this. This looks comfortable. But they come out, and Phil Salt, he tries to hit the 3rd ball over cover for 6 and misses it completely. He whacks the next ball or 2, he whacks over deep mid wicket for 6, and happy days there. But then he's out for 11, and then Buttler and Bairstow just struggled. Neither of them could get their strike rate out of the 80s, let alone above a run a ball, let alone up to 8 and over. And they kind of chew their way through that power play, ending up with 41 from the 6 overs, which for them is well unders, and that's riding on the quick runs from Salt at the start. Both of them end up well under a run a ball.
And I think we said, obviously this is a game where you can nitpick pretty much anything and make it the thing, but the thing that Buttler said was, he said Quinton de Kock was the difference, because England got 20 fewer than South Africa in the power play.
I think that's controversial for the guy who made 63 off 30 balls.
True, but that power play was basically the difference in the game.
Straight into the Sky commentary box with that analysis.
But we also had, I suppose the other thing that we should mention from the power play, having bagged Hendricks, is that the catch he took at short cover off Salt, while it was probably one that you should take at short cover, it was also a real good catch, diving to his right. I think he was only 20 metres away from the bat, like really in tight. So I thought he did really well there, and I thought South Africa were also good in terms of Markram getting the spin into the game early with Maharaj, because he was always going to play a big impact in this game. England were probably always going to chuck Moeen up at some point, which they did. He ended up coming in at number 4, but the bold play which they then took was, rather than sort of relying too much on new ball swing, because it wasn't really a day where you were going to get too much swing, it was more about bounce and spin and cutters today. They got Maharaj in early, they let him bowl at the right-handers, and in the end he comes away conceding a run at ball and gets Bairstow and Butler both out, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he did get them both, and that's just after the power play. So the 7th over, Maharaj concedes 2 and picks up Bairstow's wicket after Bairstow's already been dropped. Yeah, just sort of chopping it away to backward point where he gets caught. Nortje bowls an over for 7, Maharaj bowls an over for 6 and picks up Butler. Markram bowls that over for 4 that I mentioned earlier. If Aidan Markram's bowling an over for 4 runs, your batting side's not going well. Just put it that way. And the 11th over, Bartman picks up Moeen, pulling one out to deep mid-wicket. Moeen and the tendency for daft pull shots is I mean, I might have banged on about this a bit too much but it brings to mind the Ashes last year when he kept getting out hooking when they had like 9 men out for the hook, and he's like, I think I'll play a hook shot. I think I'll play it in the air down to where that guy is who just dropped me about 2 overs earlier. And today was similar, because he played the identical shot against West Indies the other night into that spot between the stands where there is a howling gale coming through. There's a rank of 12 flags pointing straight at you, and you're like, that's my spot. Into that wind, that's where I'm going to play the pull shot, and he gets caught there 2 games running in 3 days.
Yeah, it was. It felt like a case of once is unfortunate and twice, come on. Yeah. By that point, to be honest, England looked completely toast, didn't they? I thought at 60 for 4, I actually thought one of the things that was playing on my mind there was, I was thinking from the group's point of view, from the bigger picture, and zoom out of this one game. If England get rolled here, and suddenly they had Jofra Archer coming in at number 8, so it was a shorter batting lineup than we're used to from England in T20 cricket. If England get rolled here and lose by 50 odd runs, and suddenly their net run rate is going to take a big hit, and they're probably going to have to thrash the US if they're going to be in a position where they're comfortable heading into the last game of the group. They have the disadvantage of playing first. So it was a point where not only did Brook and Livingston need to soak out some balls so that they could launch to the back end, they also needed to soak out some balls just to score some runs so that they could make sure that they weren't going to get absolutely hammered.
But they get the momentum going. This is interesting. So, I mean, they need sort of 12, 13 and over at this point, and they're not quite doing that. They're getting 9. They get 9 off Nortje. They get 9 off Maharaj. They take half a dozen off Jansen. Then they get 18 off a Rabada over where he bowls pace on too often, and they're able to use that pace to slash him away. Brook starts getting the scoop out. He starts looking... I mean, Brook is... When he's up and running, he looks like a level above everybody else in this team.
Just to come in on that, the scoop is such an important shot, I thought, in that Brook innings. I know it wasn't a match-winning innings in the end, but the scoop is so important because South Africa gambled early with Brook. They had the fine leg up in the ring, which is very unusual for teams because of the fact that Brook scoops. So once he gets the scoop out, he actually missed the first one he played, but the second one he played, he gets away, and that means that was off Rabada, and the start of the next over, which was Nortje, that meant they had to have mid-off up.
Yes.
So Brook, what does he do? He immediately gives him the charge, flat bats him over mid-off for 4. Yep. Then the next ball, he realises he's going to go fuller and pushes him through mid-off for 4 again. Yep. So basically, by playing that one shot, he's unlocked his next 2 shots and has got 12 runs off 3 balls, which is such a little clutch play from a young player at his second T20 World Cup. To suddenly have the awareness to say, not only am I going to do this is going to mean this, and therefore this. It's like he's playing a game of chess and has thought 3 moves ahead against a team that was only thinking the next move. It was
super smart batting, and Livingston at the other end is able to be a bit more brutish and straightforward and just use muscle to hit some shots where required. They take 13 off that Nortje over, and then there's the over of hilarity with poor old Bartman, who's bowled so well through the early stages, loved those sticky pitches in New York, comes in here, 6 balls, 5 full tosses. He goes 4, 4, 6, 2, 1, 4. I mean, probably the 2 and the 1 should have gone for 4 or 6 as well. The one ball where he actually hit the pitch was a slower ball into the surface, and that went for the single. But the 2 should have been a 4 as well, because that wasn't quite connected. Both those first 2 4s from Livingston both almost carry for 6 over the offside. They both fall about a foot short, so that could have made a big difference in the overall analysis too. But he just lost it, and nobody came up to him. His teammates didn't come up and say, "All right, you're only playing your 5th game for South Africa or something like that. You're a senior, like an older player who's come in, who doesn't have the experience at this level. We're going to help you out here. Just drive a bouncer into the pitch. Just do something." He didn't get any support, and he just kept dishing them up knee-high full tosses, getting whacked.
Yeah, it felt like a classic. Just what you said there, the inexperience, I thought really showed where you quite often get this thing when bowlers are new into their career where they have one trick or 1 or 2 things that they do, and Bartman has had a lot of success in the SA20 with the Yorker at the death, so that was his plan. And after trying the first one and missing the first one, rather than having a slower ball or having a back of length ball that he could reliably turn to, his only plan was, well, I missed plan A, so let me try plan A again and let me try plan A a third time, and let me try 5 plan A's in the over and miss it the wrong way every time. And I think no coincidence that the breeze was blowing that way, so he missed on the long side. I think when the breeze is behind you have to aim to miss slightly short, if anything, and risk the half volley rather than missing full and therefore throwing up a load of full tosses, which really brought England into a position they should have won with 3 overs to go.
Totally, 3 overs to go, 25 to get, and then Livingstone hits that monster, but he just hits it to the wrong side. He doesn't have a choice. He's only got one way that ball can go, but he has to hit it into the wind. It hangs up in the wind. They end up taking that catch, and that means by the time it's getting into the last over, as Brook gets out at the start of the 20th, doesn't he? First ball of the 20th, trying to go down the ground. By that point, they needed 14 off the last over because there's been a really good 19th has been bowled by Jansen that only goes for 7 runs. So it was a bit too much. It was a bit too tall an ask, and then Archer's got to come in at that point batting with Curran. Curran manages to glance a boundary, but then sort of turns down the single to try to whack a couple of boundaries to finish it off. Can't quite do it. But, narrow loss, damage control done. And for South Africa, I don't know what to make of South Africa. I just don't think they're that good. I mean, I think they're great on paper. All of their players on paper are like hot shit, but they've all been playing like cold shit through this World Cup, aside from Miller, really, who's dug them out of every hole they've been in. Quinton de Kock's come good in the Super 8s. Their bowling's been good, but their batting's been drudge. And I find it hard to see how they'll make that work against a team that's able to exploit that. But I was surprised that they got over the line today. I don't know. What's your general take?
Yeah, it's a really tricky one. I can see it both ways. I think there's definitely something to be said for the fact they've won a load of close games as a team with a history of choking. Therefore, it can only be a good thing that they're closing out these tight wins. There's the other side of that, which is that it would be the single most South African thing that had happened in World Cup history if, having had all of these close wins, they had their first loss of the tournament, and somehow, with everyone taking wins off each other in this group, that was enough to knock them out at the expense of West Indies and England, which I think is actually a scenario that's quite in play potentially. But I actually think that given a pitch like this today, which was a little slower, their template is set up quite well for a pitch like that, because their ideal innings with the bat, some teams are prepared to lose 5 or 6 wickets with the bat in an innings. South Africa are realistically trying to end the innings 4 down because they have 6 proper batters and Jansen. And that's been the approach they've gone with for the past couple of World Cups, rather than trying to have batting all-rounders and compromise on the bowling. They've said we're a strong bowling side, and we have types of players who are good enough all-round cricketers like Miller and like Klaasen and like Markram, that we back our middle order to actually just face 120 balls and score enough runs that our decent bowling attack can defend them. So I do think they're a good side. I don't think it's a sort of coincidence or a fluke that they've won all these games, but I do also agree that there are some vulnerabilities, and I think the thing is they might not play on another belter, because they play Antigua, which has been good, but then the semi-venues, Trinidad's been very two-paced and up and down, and Guyana's sort of notoriously spins. The final in Barbados again hasn't been a complete belter. Maybe they win it by being the best team equipped for slowish, not shit heaps, but tougher pitches.
If South Africa win it by chasing 107 in 19 and a half overs, like say 8 wickets down, that's going to be the perfect scenario. All right, quick break, then the Hall of Fame. Final word. Daily, brought to you by Westfield. Remember, mango season, Armfest is happening at Westfield, London, at Copper Chimney. That's the mango festival. All the pickles, all the sauces, all the desserts, everything that you can make a mango into, they have made a mango into. The true all-rounder of the fruit world. So if you want to go, mango, down to Westfield, London, for the Copper Chimney. That's the great Indian restaurant down there, the mango festival that's happening there over the course of the summer. Hall of Fame, let's see. It's hard to go past the guy who walked out of the gate before we were about to film and looked at me and goes, "What country are you from?" And I said, "Australia." And he went, "Fuck." Just that, and walked off. Like, he just really wanted me to be English so he could give me shit for losing the game, I think.
That was a good start. I'm trying to think if I have anything for the Hall of Fame. I think the possible... I mean, that could be one in itself. I think potentially... I do really enjoy Rabada just relentlessly celebrating, regardless of the fact that he keeps copping demerit points. How many times have we had a press release between us in the past 7, 8, 9 years saying...
1 point, 2 points, 1 point, 2 points.
It's like a sort of Pac-Man or something, trying to eat the demerit points going around. But yeah, celebrating right in Livingston's face, and fair play to him. If he avoids a ban and he keeps playing for the rest of the World Cup, then realistically, who cares? He can afford to lose 50% of a match fee or whatever it is. So I enjoyed it.
It'd be sad. It would be sad if he got banned, given just how nicely he's been bowling on occasion. Won them that game against the US, basically, with that 19th over that he bowled there, wasn't it? So, look, it's been a lot of fun. We've got one more game here at St Lucia, Australia versus India. You're off. Are you off following England? Oh, you're here for that one?
Yeah, which I'm really looking forward to, especially if it's a similar type of surface to this one. And I think one of the great things about St Lucia that we've seen so far is firstly that generally the pitches have been good, but secondly how I do think the wind makes every game so tactically interesting and adds so much to it. You really have to sort of be following and know which end is which and all this sort of thing to be completely across what's gone on in these games, and it's made it really, really absorbing to be at.
If you see the flags blowing towards you, don't hit it towards the flags. It's like the opposite of the beach. Don't go towards the flags. Go away from the flags. That's it. All right. This has been the Final Word T20 World Cup Daily. Thanks to Matt Roller for joining the show, Westfield London, Westfield Stratford City for sponsoring it. You can support the show at patreon.com/thefinalword. You can get the ad-free feed there as well. And you will get us later on tonight for the USA versus West Indies that's happening. There'll be an episode. Keep an eye on the feed. We'll see you there.